In League of Legends, there are over 155 champions to choose from, and 5 different roles. To beginners, it might seem daunting at first to learn all of this on top of other game mechanics, such as CSing, wave control, roaming, objectives, and more. But learning new champions might be easier than you think. Let's take for example, Lux. Lux is a squishy ranged mage, played in the middle and support roles. She, like most champions, has 4 active abilities: a damaging root, a shield, a damaging spell that also slows, and a beam of light that does a ton of damage. Lux's most basic bread and butter combo in the early game is to root the enemy with her Q, then cast and detonate her E. Now, let's compare Lux to 2 other champions, Ahri and Neeko. Both champions are also squishy ranged mages that are played in the mid lane. Both champions have a core damaging ability for wave clear and dueling. Both have crowd control abilities to help them land their said damaging abilities. The other active abilities they have are different, of course. You don't want to have every single champion be the same. But similarities help players, especially new ones, have an easier time adjusting to new characters. That way, you don't have to necessarily rely on one champion to perform well. Most if not all champions fall into this category. Everyone has at least a few abilities, similar to other champions. And of course, with abilities comes playstyle. In League, there are 5 roles: top, jungle, middle, bottom, and support. I personally am a jungle main, and I go support secondary. The reason being is that I don't think that I'm a mechanically sound player, and I play champions that are in the meta. I usually stay around the engage, bruisery, tanky characters. In the jungle, my 3 most played characters are Warwick, Xin Zhao, and Kayn, specifically red form. All 3 do a good amount of damage while still having a good amount of tankiness and sustain. Playing these characters allowed me to get into gold my first season, Season 8, and I from time to time play them if needed. I of course transitioned to different junglers and different playstyles, but I have more or less picked champions that suited my tanky engage archetype. There is a running stereotype in League that female players or e-girls play the supportive mage characters. Although it's not always true, I think it mostly stems from each character's similar playstyle. Shields, heals, some CC, disengage. I mean, come on. Guys who like playing assassin archetypes like playing assassins. Tank top players like playing tank tops. You shouldn't be ashamed to stick with one character, archetype, or position because not everyone is Faker or Dopa. Not everyone can play an aggressive high damage ADC, a shielding supporting jungler, and a tankery monstrous top laner at a pro level like Tyler 1.
Oh, Big T's about to get massive.
You know me as low tier God.
Fighting games are a really fun genre in competitive gaming. In my opinion, the most accessible franchise in this genre is of course Super Smash Bros. I know fighting game purists might not say it's an actual fighting game due to its unconventional mechanics, but to me, that's what makes Smash Smash. It's a platform fighter. Instead of having a health bar, you have a percentage, and the higher your percentage is, the farther away you can be knocked and possibly die. Due to its unconventional nature, Smash is more about the neutral game than something like combos. That's not to say that Smash doesn't have combos. Its free-form adaptive nature allows players to create combos on the fly, depending on the situation. But you don't have to be a combo god to do well. Having control over the center of your stage and keeping your opponent off it is, in my opinion, the most important part of Smash. Compare Smash to a traditional fighting game, like Street Fighter. Street Fighter has a lot to do with the fundamental basics of fighting games. Your spacing, neutral game, and quick combos. Where Smash and Street Fighter differ, however, is very interesting. Smash puts more of an emphasis on an aerial game, while Street Fighter has more of an emphasis on a ground game. Smash is more beginner-friendly as most characters do not have motion inputs, and traditional fighting games, moves need motion inputs to execute. I can talk more about the differences in each game, but you get my point. Despite that, however, they and many other fighting games have so much in common. I talked about neutral game and stage control before, but I need to emphasize why it's so important. If you're at the edge of a stage in Smash, you lose a stock. So taking control of the middle of the stage and punishing your opponent when they're off is ideal. In traditional fighting games, when your back is against a wall, you're in a tough position, as you don't have much space to move. By no means am I saying that it's impossible to play when your back is against a wall, both literally and figuratively, but playing in that position is excruciatingly tough. especially when you're predictable because your opponent can easily counter any and everything you do. That's why spacing is so important in fighting games. The better your position is on stage, the more advantages you're able to have. Punishing, tech, kill confirms, combos, footsies, air complexity. Most, if not all games share these, and many more mechanics because fundamentally, they're all similar. A one-on-one battle where both of you are trying to outwit and outplay the other.
The mix! Oh god! The mix is there! Daigo makes it into Capcom Cup!
One aspect of traditional fighting games that many people might seem difficult would be motion inputs. To be honest, they're not that hard. It's just moving your stick in a certain direction and then hitting a button.
People have called motion inputs a form of gatekeeping, but you wouldn't even be able to gatekeep children and dogs with this.
Yes. Holy shit!
Core Gaming made an amazing video detailing why motion inputs still exist, so I recommend you check it out. However, to sum things up, motion inputs exist for balancing purposes. Strong moves equal harder inputs and more time to execute them. Most moves fall into a few types of motions. This command grab by Mei in Guilty Gear Strive needs a Z motion input to do. This input is famously called the Dragon Punch motion, and is commonplace in many different fighting game characters and games. It's the same motion as Kai's anti-air, Soul's anti-air and command grab, Ken's Shoryuken, Ryu's Shuriken, Luke's Rising Rocket, and so on. For me, the hardest part about learning a character isn't entirely the act of doing these motions themselves, but rather knowing what they do, when to use them, and how to execute them in quick succession. There's a reason why many different pros are good at many different fighting games. Sonic Fox has won 5 EVO titles, the biggest yearly fighting game tournament in the world, and 3 different franchises: Injustice, Mortal Kombat, and Dragon Ball FighterZ. The same could be said with guys like Daigo Imahara in Street Fighter and Guilty Gear, and Justin Wong in Street Fighter and Marvel vs. Capcom.
Justin Wong! Oh my god!
Similar to the fighting game community, many players of different shooters can transition easily into other games. Tens is seen by many as the best Valorant player in the world, but before becoming a Valorant prodigy, he played a lot of CSGO. Both games are very similar to each other as both are tactical shooters, which was why Tens' transition went so smoothly. The same can be said by guys like Hiko, Shazam, Shroud, and others. There are a lot of things that shooters have in common, whether it's arena, tactical, battle royale, and more. I think once you've learned the basics of a shooter, it is very easy to learn other games, as gunplay is one of the most, if not the most important mechanics to learn in any shooter. Compared to something like fighting games, in my opinion, the jump from one franchise to another is steeper than it is for shooters. Take for example, Guilty Gear and Street Fighter. If you're good at Guilty Gear Strive, that does not mean you are going to absolutely body people when you play your first online Street Fighter match. You need to know combos, frame data, and motion inputs for your selected character. In shooters, you just need to shoot. All ARs are going to act like ARs. All snipers are going to act like snipers. And all shotguns are going to act like shotguns. There are exceptions to this, of course, but from my experience, the transition period from one fighting game franchise to another is harder than the transition period from a shooter franchise to another. This is what's called the skill floor. The skill floor is a term used to describe the amount of knowledge or mechanical ability needed to have a base understanding and do decently on a character or game. A character or game having a low skill floor is known to be easy to learn, while a character or game having a high skill floor is known to be hard. Note that this is different from the skill ceiling, the term used to judge a game or character's theoretical highest potential and strength given enough practice. Traditional fighting games, to me, have a high skill floor, as to obtain a basic understanding of the game, you need to learn a lot of mechanics. However, due to the amount of mechanics and their complexity, they generally have a high skill ceiling. Games like Apex Legends have a low skill floor because it is an FPS battle royale. But knowing positioning, tap strafing, and crazy movement is what separates a good player from a pro. Learning new mechanics in all sorts of games can be cool. After all, that's what makes games fresh and different from each other. Guilty Gear has its Roman cancels, Street Fighter has its EX moves, Tekken has its 3D aspect, Fortnite has its building, Apex has its cool refreshing abilities, and League has its toxic fanbase. All of these games have something that makes them different than others, but at the end of the day, they are all very similar in concept to one another. This can also be applied to different things in real life. Take for example languages. This word is the word for fire in Mandarin Chinese. It's pronounced huo. In Japanese, not only is the character for fire the same, but it is also pronounced similarly, hi. In French, the word for fire is feu, and the word for flame is la flamme. Again, very similar. Programming languages share many similar concepts with other programming languages, along with their similar syntax. Video editing programs at their core are similar, and only differ in their UI, how you apply effects, and more. Research from neuroscientists have shown that playing a musical instrument is beneficial to your brain, as it can improve activities that you might not think are related to music. Even if most of the things you learn in school, online, or in real life might not apply to different aspects of your life, learning about new things is interesting. And maybe, just maybe, some of those skills you have learned can be useful to you in the future.